So over the past couple of years that I've been a hardcore Sonic fan, my opinions on the games have changed quite a lot. For example, there were games that I didn't really enjoy on my first playthrough, but I really like them now. And unfortunately, there are games that I liked on my first go, but over time, they just didn't stick with me. But one thing that hasn't changed for certain is that my favorite game in the series is still Sonic Unleashed. And it's been that way ever since I first played the game 2 years ago. As we all know, when Sonic Unleashed first came out back in 2008, it got pretty mixed reviews. Some people liked the game, but most people just bashed it to a bloody pulp. Why? Well, it was because of this thing. It wasn't until recent years when people started looking more positively back at Sonic Unleashed. And a lot of people, including myself, consider this game to be one of the best, if not the best Sonic game ever made. But why is that? Well, let's find out. So the story begins with Dr. Eggman attempting to take over the world once again, and the blue blur is there to put a stop to it as usual. The two duke it out until Eggman manages to catch Sonic and the battle seems over, until... Oh my god, it's Super Sonic! Super Sonic effortlessly destroys every ship in his path and then manages to corner Eggman. Or so it seems. Eggman then traps Sonic and easily sucks the Chaos Emeralds right out of him, and then uses their energy to split the entire fucking planet into pieces. Eggman did this to awaken a creature from within the planet known as Dark Gaia, and this causes Sonic to turn into a werewolf-hedgehog hybrid. Okay. Eggman is overjoyed that his latest scheme was a success, and then he sends Sonic plummeting to the planet below along with the lifeless Chaos Emeralds. As Sonic gains his bearings, he then finds a little creature who apparently has amnesia. He then decides to help him find his memory and the two immediately become friends. As the two high-five for the first time, the sun rises and then Sonic changes back to his normal hedgehog form. How does he get his gloves back? After the two get some ice cream, Sonic decides to name his new friend Chip, since he is obsessed with chocolate chip sundaes. Nighttime eventually falls and then Sonic transforms back into his werehog form. Sonic then comes to the realization that his new form is triggered when the sun goes down. Sonic then finds Tails, who is being attacked by the spawn of Dark Gaia. After dealing with the Dark Gaia spawn, Tails then informs Sonic that one of his friends, Professor Pickle, might be able to help resolve the situation. Tails then fires up the Tornado 3 and then the trio head for Spagonia. Once they arrive at Spagonia University, they unfortunately learn that Professor Pickle has been kidnapped by Dr. Eggman. But luckily, the trio managed to rescue him in no time flat. Professor Pickle then informs Sonic that in order to put the planet back together, they need to restore energy to the Chaos Emeralds. And in order to do that, they need to travel to each of the 7 Gaia temples across the world. Sonic and Chip travel to the first Gaia temple, which is located back in Missouri. The Chaos Emerald gets restored and then the first continent moves back into place in the process. And this is pretty much how the story plays out from this point on. Sonic and Chip travel to a temple on each continent, the Chaos Emerald gets restored, and in the process, the continent moves back into place. Meanwhile, Dr. Eggman is trying to use Dark Gaia's power to create his own evil carnival. But the process has been slow since Eggman gave Dark Gaia a sudden awakening, which caused the creature to scatter across the world. Eggman then formulates a plan to gather all the Dark Gaia spawn together so that he can create the complete version of Dark Gaia. Meanwhile, Sonic and Chip restore the 6th continent, and then Chip learns that his real name is Light Gaia, the opposite of Dark Gaia, and that it was his duty to protect the planet from the creature whenever it awakened. But Chip lost his memory due to Eggman breaking the world apart himself. But now that his memory has been restored, Chip insists on confronting Dark Gaia alone, and keeping Sonic out of harm's way. But then Sonic asks him,
"Do I need a reason to want to help out a friend?" "Thanks, Sonic."
Man, I love this cutscene. Remember when Sonic games actually had good writing? Good times. Tails then drops Sonic and Chip off at their final destination, the Crimson Carnival, known as Eggman Land. Yep, after 10 years since Sonic Adventure, Eggman finally managed to create the brainchild of his heart and soul. Sonic and Chip fight their way through Eggman Land and eventually reach the final temple. They restore the energy to the last Chaos Emerald, and in the process the final continent starts to move back into place. Unfortunately, their victory gets cut short when Dr. Eggman unveils his brand new creation, the Ultra Hyper Prototype 1! Or just the Egg Dragoon as everyone calls it. Eggman then takes the fight to the outer layer of the planet's core, and of course Sonic manages to destroy the Egg Dragoon. But the fight still ain't over yet! Dark Gaia emerges from the magma and then knocks Eggman away. Just as Sonic prepares to fight off Dark Gaia, the beast rips the last of its energy right out of him, making it impossible for him to ever transform back into the Werehog. Chip then summons all of the Gaia temples to form the Gaia Colossus. But this time, Chip cannot defeat Dark Gaia alone since he is way too powerful. So Sonic, in a last-ditch effort, summons all of the Chaos Emeralds to become Super Sonic once again. Sonic and Chip work together to fight off Dark Gaia, and eventually Sonic finishes the creature off by flying straight through its freaking face.
Fatality.
Sonic then becomes exhausted and passes out, but luckily Chip manages to catch him before he falls into the magma. Chip then bids farewell to his friend before throwing him back to the surface. Sonic ends up landing at the exact same spot where he landed at the beginning of the game. As he regains his bearings, he looks around for Chip but only ends up finding his bracelet. He then hears Chip's voice assuring him that he will always be there by him as part of the earth he treads. Sonic then puts on Chip's bracelet, which he never wears again after this game for some reason, and then runs off with Tails flying by his side. And that was the story for Sonic Unleashed, and wow, it was a damn good one. And if I'm being completely honest, this was the last Sonic game to have a great story. Yes, I said it. Don't get me wrong, I really liked Black Knight's story, and I somewhat liked Generations' story even though it was kind of non-existent. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that none of the stories that came after this came close to topping Unleashed. The story is somewhat serious, but it's also funny when it needs to be. And the best part about the humor is that it actually works. Unlike the games from the 2010s. As for the voice acting in this game, it's pretty good. Amy Pallant sounds pretty good as Tails, Lisa Ortiz sounds pretty good as Amy, Dan Green sounds alright as Professor Pickle, and Jason Griffiths sounds pretty good as Sonic. Although I'm now more of a fan of Ryan Drummond's take on the character, I still think that Jason Griffith did a pretty solid job in this game. And of course there's Mike Pollock, who is doing a fantastic job as Dr. Eggman as always. I mean seriously, he is easily the best voice for the character. Nobody will ever replace him. Nobody! Alrighty, that's enough about the story, let's talk about the gameplay now. Sonic Unleashed features two different gameplay styles. During the daytime, you will control regular Sonic, and during the night, you will control his Werehog form. Let's talk about the daytime gameplay first. Ever heard of a little game called Sonic Rush? Well, this gameplay style is basically that, in 3D. Sonic's main ability in this gameplay style is of course the boost. Just fill up the meter and then hold down the X or square button, and then Sonic will take off instantly. And it's so breathtaking to watch Sonic run this ridiculously fast. In order to fill up the boost meter, all you have to do is keep on collecting rings, and once it's full, you can go full out. Yeah! While I can agree that this is a lot more linear than the adventure formula, the boost gameplay style is still a ton of fun in its own way. Sonic also has a stomp, which he can use to crush through weak floors. His other two moves, which are staple to 3D Sonic games, are the Lightspeed Dash, and of course the homing attack, which for some reason in this game is now mapped to the boost button instead of the jump button. I mean, I can adjust to this pretty easily, but that doesn't mean they should have changed it in the first place. Oh yeah, Sonic also has a quick step which you can use to avoid incoming obstacles, and a drift ability which sadly isn't as useful as it is in Generations. So yeah, while the adventure formula is more open-ended and I do understand why some people might prefer that style, I still really love the boost gameplay. Now let's talk about the most controversial side of Unleashed, the Werehog. Gone is the high speed, and in its place is basically a God of War clone. Around the time of the game's development, the hack and slash genre was extremely popular, with games like Devil May Cry and of course God of War. So Sega decided to throw their hat into the ring. And how did they do that? By turning Sonic into a freaking werewolf. Okay, although I like the werehog, I still gotta ask, was this really the best decision to make after every game critic on the internet beat Sonic 06 into a bloody pulp? Anyways, despite that, I still really enjoy the werehog's gameplay style. It has less emphasis on speed and focuses more on platforming and exploration, which in a way reminds me of Sonic's gameplay style from Adventure 1. The werehog also isn't that slow either, since you can hold either of the triggers to make him run. But of course, the main focus of the werehog stages are the fighting sections. Like other hack and slash games, you perform light attacks by using the X/square button, and heavy attacks by using the Y/triangle button. And with different button combinations you can perform special attacks such as the spinning needle attack and the Shoryuken! You also have an unleash ability which temporarily grants you extra strength and invulnerability. So yeah, I really enjoy the werehog stages. Even if they are pretty lengthy. Yeah, one of the reasons people criticized Unleashed was because the werehog stages were just too damn long. But personally, I'm not bothered by this at all. The levels are enjoyable anyway, so I really don't care if they're long. Same goes for Sonic Heroes, I don't care how lengthy the stages are, just as long as I'm having fun. And to be honest, I'd rather have a game with really long levels rather than a game with levels that are over before you know it. Actually, while we're on the topic of levels, let's talk about the levels in Unleashed. Sonic Unleashed will have you travelling across the world visiting locations based off places in real life. For example, we have Apatos representing Greece, Cheonan representing China, Empire City representing New York City, and my personal favourite, Spagonia, which represents Europe. And whether the gameplay style is Russian 3D or God of War starring Sonic, the levels in this game are a lot of fun to play. However, I guess I should address the elephant in the room. Eggman Land, probably the most unforgiving level in any Sonic game, period. This level will throw everything at you, including the kitchen sink. However, to be honest, I really don't find this level that difficult nowadays. Probably because I've gotten really good at the game and I've played this level so many times that I rarely die in it. Don't get me wrong, this level is still pretty hard, but I don't find it nearly as hard as it was on my first playthrough. On my first playthrough of Unleashed back in 2019, it took me 40 minutes to beat Eggman Land, whereas nowadays I can finish it in half that time. So yeah, I'd still gladly take this level over Labyrinth Zone any day of the week. Also, in order to progress through the game, you will need to collect Sun and Moon medals. These are basically like the power stars in Mario 64, as you will need a certain amount to unlock new levels. And yes, collecting them in the daytime stages can be a pain since you're mostly boosting, but since I've played this game multiple times, I know roughly where all the Sun and Moon medals are. And collecting them in the werehog stages and the hub worlds isn't that much of an issue to begin with, since you're pretty much free to explore in those scenarios. The boss fights in this game are pretty good as well. For the most part anyways. I really like the bosses you fight as the werehog since each one brings something new to the table. But the bosses you fight as regular Sonic, they all pretty much play out the same. Just dodge the boss's attacks, boost at him, rinse and repeat. Now, the daytime boss fights aren't bad by any means, but they are pretty repetitive. But the final boss fight is amazing. Yeah, it has the same issue as Eggman Land where it's pretty tough on the first playthrough, but the more you play it, the better you'll get at it. The game's soundtrack is pretty amazing too. This was Tomoyo Otani's second go at being the sound director for a Sonic game, and this has to be his best work yet. The main theme of the game, Endless Possibility, has to be one of my favourite main Sonic themes of all time. Right up there with Open Your Heart, Live and Learn, Sonic Heroes, and Night of the Wind. I also love Dear My Friend, which reflects on Sonic and Chip's friendship throughout the game, and it makes me miss Chip even more. So yeah, Sonic Unleashed soundtrack is easily the best in the series. And that was Sonic Unleashed.
You're not done yet, mate.
Oh, hey Shimoda. What do you want?
Well, no Sonic Unleashed review would be complete without the other version.
Thanks, I guess.
No problem. Now, get on with it!
Yes, get on with it!
So, along with being released on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, Sonic Unleashed also got released on the Nintendo Wii. And unsurprisingly, that version got ported to PlayStation 2, but we're not going to talk about that version. The Wii version of Sonic Unleashed was developed by Dimps of all people. Yeah, Dimps. The same guys who developed the Advanced Trilogy, the Rush Duology, and the handheld ports of Sonic Colors, Generations, and Lost World. And since these were the guys who introduced the boost formula to the Sonic series, they weren't the worst choice to be put in charge of making the Wii version of Unleashed. But then again, this is a Wii version of an Xbox 360 game, so I doubt that the graphics are gonna look that pleasing, and oh my god, they look worse than I could have possibly imagined. I mean, this game certainly doesn't look awful, but my god, even the storybook games managed to look more appealing than this. I guess I can understand why Dimps mostly stuck to making games for handheld systems at the time. The day stages play almost like they do in the HD version, except in this version they're pretty bare and uninteresting. Like most of the time you're just boosting in an empty space. Another problem I have with the day stages in the Wii version is the boost. Instead of having one continuous boost like in the HD version, the Wii version's boost is split into separate pieces. Meaning that if you want to keep the boost going, you have to keep pressing the boost button, or if you're using the Wii remote, you have to keep flicking that damn thing over and over again. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention that since this is an early Wii game, motion controls are shoved down your throat in this version. But thankfully you can use the GameCube controller or the classic controller if you want. So that's good. As for the Werehog stages, they also pale in comparison to the 360 and PS3 versions. The Werehog is lacking many of his moves found in the HD version, and instead of playing one giant level, the Werehog stages in this version are split into separate acts, whereas regular Sonic only gets one stage. So basically this means you'll be playing as the Werehog more than regular Sonic. Say what you will about the Werehog, but at least the HD version did a better job at balancing out the two gameplay styles. But hey, it doesn't matter if the Werehog gets more levels in the Wii version, at least the levels are actually fun, right? Right? Since the Werehog is lacking many of his skills from the Xbox 360 version, the fighting sections in this version aren't that fun at all. They're kind of boring actually. The Werehog's control is very slippery in this version as well, which is pretty annoying considering he controlled just fine in the Xbox 360 version. Like seriously, in this version he controls like he's on ice. And again, it's pretty freaking annoying. And the actual controls are pretty frustrating as well. Like for example, when you want to grab onto a ledge, you actually have to hold onto the button, whereas in the HD version you just have to tap it. And for some reason, to make the Werehog run, you have to double flick the analog stick, which can lead to unfair deaths. And of course, just like the daytime stages, the night stages also have motion controls, which... okay, I'm not gonna lie, I actually find kinda fun. But as a whole, Sonic Unleashed on the Wii is just not that great. It's certainly not horrible, but it pales in comparison to the HD version. But anyways, that was Sonic Unleashed, and 2 years after I first played it, I still love it to death. Some people may say that their favourite Sonic game is SA2, or Heroes, or Mania, or 3 and Knuckles, but my favourite Sonic game will likely always be Unleashed, and I'm so glad that I'm not alone in that. As I've said many times throughout the video, the game is available on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, but it's also playable on Xbox One and Series X through backwards compatibility. So yeah, this game was the reason I got an Xbox Series X instead of a PS5. And if you're at all curious about the Wii version, then by all means, check it out. It's not that good, but it's not horrible either. But for some reason, this game still hasn't gotten a PC release. And even though I'm not a PC gamer at all, I still think that this game should get released on PC. But sadly, it will likely never happen. But anyways, that was my review of Sonic Unleashed. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see y'all later.